We catch up with Assistant Town Manager Mark Ells on this episode of Barnstable Today. It's Thursday, May 23rd, 2013. I'm Sarah Colvin. Assistant Town Manager Mark Ells paid a visit to our studios this week. We talked about a number of things, including an update on the West Barnstable shooting range. We share that interview with you now here on Barnstable Today. Lots of stuff to talk about. I think we've been getting some questions about what's going on in West Barnstable in terms of the shooting range. So I know obviously still things in the process. What can you tell us? Can you give us an update on what's going on?
Sure. The town managers asked me to lead a group to discuss any modifications we might have relevant to the operation of the facility so that we can move forward with reopening it. From the Public Works perspective, they're finishing up with the berm work they're doing out there. Certainly expect to see that done by the end of June. And we're just working on the details of the operating plan, because I think you're probably aware that as we began to look at this issue, we understood the safety concerns that revolve around the operation of a shooting range, and want to make sure that our methods are current and safe and acceptable, and will result in us being able to get an insurance policy to cover the use of the facility. So, we expect even by the end of this month to be giving the managers some draft versions of that, and then we also anticipate to go out to our users and ask them with a questionnaire how they feel about what we're proposing and the type of use, so that we can make sure that when we reopen this, it's a program that works for them, as well as takes into account all the other factors that weigh into this. The interesting thing in researching these shooting ranges is we couldn't find another municipal one in Massachusetts. Right. So a lot of our research went far outside of our state, and it's actually limited the number of municipalities that offer these. In a lot of cases, states have taken them over. In every case, whatever the appropriate law enforcement agency is, are certainly a part of it, as well as departments of natural resource, and certainly whatever general governmental agency. So, right. And that's what we're using a little bit for a model here, to make sure, again, we come out with a safe and functional facility.
Indeed, and I think when you think about a facility such as a shooting range, safety, I think, should trump everything in terms of priority. You want to make sure that it is as safe as possible.
Absolutely, with all that we do, not just the shooting range, and so that's our objective here, and we're progressing well toward it.
Wonderful. Any idea as to a possible timeline, or maybe the earliest it could possibly open, or is that really hard to tell at this point?
I want to just firm up the operating plan a little more to give that answer. We're certainly shooting for this calendar year, but we got to make sure that all the pieces are in place to be able to proceed with that.
Absolutely. Well, I know you will keep us up to date on that. I want to talk briefly as well. Actually, we'll do that later. Move on and talk a little bit about the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And a few weeks ago, we had, of course, Glenn Cannon, who's our Technical Services Director of the Cape Cod Commission, talk to us a little bit about what the MPO is. And I understand you are a part of that organization as well.
I am. I'm the town's representative on the MPO, have been for several years. And, the term Metropolitan Planning Organization, people will scratch their heads and say, what is that? Really, what that organization does is, on an annual basis, looks at federal transportation funds that are coming in for our region, and works with, in this case, our Cape Cod Commission, to program those funds. And so a primary task for that committee is to review that plan, work with the Federal Highway Administration, work with the Executive Office of Transportation, and work with Mass DOT to make sure that we can move forward with the region's priorities. Now, you can imagine Barnstable has a lot of priorities.
Yes, we do.
Because we are the economic center, certainly, of Cape Cod, but we also have a lot of major roadways. And so we are, we weigh in heavily into how that money may be expended. Projects like 132, and when we did Bursa's Way from 132 down to 28, are projects that are included. Sometimes they're state highways, sometimes they're major local roadways. We just, at the last meeting, approved the release of the draft TIP is the term that they use, Transportation Improvement Program. So that's this program, and really it's focused on federal fiscal year 14, which would begin in October of this year. So we need to have this in place. Usually, we're usually shooting for June or July. Sometimes it can go longer. And they're looking at the various major roadway improvements. Now, to get on that list, you have to actually have a design done and have gone through a process that conforms with federal and state requirements. So it's a pretty comprehensive process to get you to the point where a project moves forward. And so we did vote to release that. Barnstable doesn't have any projects in 14, but within the 14 to 17 program, we've got the stretch of roadway on Route 28 from Bursar's Way to the back entrance to the mall next federal fiscal year. So a key component of that is the design that the Mass DOT is doing right now out along that stretch of roadway. They are progressing with that. They have had a preliminary meeting here, but we would expect to have a 25% design hearing certainly within this calendar year, so that we can make sure that by next summer we're through those federal and state requirements so that we're in line to be able to get a bid package together and go out and make some needed improvements along that state highway.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to note too, the design process, and correct me if I'm wrong, is all public. There are public hearings that are public meetings that are a part of the process. So if people, residents, business owners, concerned citizens, people who drive through the area have things that they want to maybe suggest or add to the project, that's all part of that design process as well, correct?
It is, and it's really a three-step process. Usually there's a conceptual design phase, and then you jump into the more formal pieces where, at the 25% design mark, you have a public hearing, and then you usually have a follow-up meeting somewhere between the 60 to 75% design mark, just to say, okay, here's what you said at the 25, and here's where we ended up, and is everybody good with this? Because from there on out, you're really preparing to go to bid.
Absolutely. Anything else about the MPA or the TIP that was recently released? Any projects we should keep our eye on? Does that include things like the Cape Cod Rail Trail expansion? Is that something that's included on the TIP or something?
No,
or is this
but certainly RTA receives funding to transportation-related projects that are eligible for these federal funds, and usually annually you can see hundreds of thousands of dollars, typically. There were a couple of items in there for the RTA. The total amount we're looking at for the region is probably about $7 million, a little bit more than that on average. So that's, the scope of the project. The big one in 14 was really the section of bike trail through Dennis and Yarmouth that would end over on Willow Street. And the big issue there is the Bass River Bridge, and how are they going to get over the Bass River Bridge, and will they be ready for federal fiscal year 14? Because if they're not, what will that it's actually $7.4 million, I believe, that they've got programmed, and if they're not going to use that, then how might that be reprogrammed, and who's ready to move a project forward? So that took a lot of time to discuss. The other little piece of that meeting that's important is they also do a transportation planning process there where funds are allocated annually. Cape Cod Commission oversees that. And in this next year's transportation planning they're going to do, they're going to look at Route 28 through Centerville to Hyannis. And so that entire corridor, and all of the major intersections are included there, but one of the intersections that wasn't there that we brought up and will be included is where our senior center and high school and middle school go on to Route 28. There's been a lot of discussion about that, and so that's included specifically along with all the other major intersections. And that's important for the public to know, because there is also this public input process as they plan and study this, because it could result in a traffic light, a pedestrian light, changes to a roadway.